Imagine, for a moment, being faced with a truth you never imagined you would see. That's how I felt that night, when my chest tightened and my vision blurred as I stared at my phone screen. There, at our dinner table, my mother was smiling, unaware that her words, as cruel as a blow, were being broadcast live on the internet. She was there, glass of wine in hand, laughing as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And I was in Providence, thousands of miles away, attending a real estate conference. But even from this distance, I couldn't escape the pain of that scene. "My daughter thinks selling houses makes her successful," she said, with a scornful look. "She failed nursing school and now she's just drifting through life like a hopeless loser." I froze. I couldn't believe it. My own mother, the one I had sacrificed so much for, was mocking me, and my entire family was laughing along. They didn't know it, but that live stream wasn't just a public humiliation. It was confirmation of something I feared. I would never be good enough for her. And all I wanted was for her to see how hard I had fought for her. How I had put my own dreams on hold, put my nursing education on hold, to be her caregiver, to make sure she got the best care possible when rheumatoid arthritis took hold of her. Ultimately, I was throwing all my strength, my time, my energy into supporting her. I had become her healthcare manager, handling paperwork, doctor's appointments, insurance, medications. I did it all with a heart full of love and responsibility. And what did I get in return? Mockery. But life has a funny way of teaching us. No matter how small, insignificant, or left out you feel, your journey is unique. Your story is yours. And in that moment, I knew something had to change. I could no longer allow others to define my worth. I had to make the hardest and most liberating choice of my life. I had to reclaim my self-esteem. I had to stand up. I sat on the floor of my garage, alone, taking a deep breath. I knew I had something to show my mother, something she would never have imagined. Something that would change the way she saw me, and maybe even the way I saw myself. With a folder in my hand, full of records, payments, proof of everything I had done for her, I knew I was ready to face what lay ahead. It was no longer about what she thought of me. It was about what I believed I could achieve. I was ready for my transformation. So, I ask you, how many of us go through life trying to please others? How many of us let the comments of others define us, when, in fact, true strength lies within ourselves? Today, I have chosen to be the protagonist of my own story. And I invite you to do the same. It doesn't matter how many mistakes you have made, how many challenges you have faced. What matters is what you choose to be from now on. And if you've been through something like this, if you also feel like it's time to turn the key, share your story with me in the comments. Because here, we believe in the power of transformation, in the strength that comes from within. And if you felt touched by this message, subscribe to the channel, share it with those who need to hear it, and come be part of this journey of change. Together, we can build a story of strength, overcoming, and success. Let's do it together. I had spent the last 5 years of my life keeping every receipt, every bank statement, every payment, as a way of organizing my finances, planning for the future, and making sure everything was in order for taxes. Never in a million years could I have imagined that those records would become evidence of such a profound betrayal. I took a deep breath, felt the weight of the situation in my hands, and then I sent a message to Jenna. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. When I arrived at the coffee shop, the feeling of walking into a confrontation was almost unbearable. The place was crowded, but I spotted Jenna immediately, standing out with her vibrant blue hair and oversized headphones. She looked at me with an expression that was a mix of guilt and discomfort. "I'm so sorry," she said, lowering her head. I didn't know she'd say those things. I was just doing my live broadcast like always, and then Aunt Patricia started talking about you, and it got so mean. "It's not your fault." But I didn't want to hear any more excuses. I said quietly but firmly, "Actually, I need to thank you." Jenna looked at me, confused. "Thank you? For what?" I placed the medical file on the table and opened it. Inside were 5 years of sacrifices, 5 years of payments, appointments, medications, and sleepless nights. I looked her in the eye and said calmly, "I've paid for everything. The medications, the treatments, the insurance premiums, everything." Jenna's eyes widened as she began to leaf through the documents. "That's thousands of dollars. Over 100,000, in fact." I nodded. I put my entire life on hold for her. My education, my savings, my relationships. Everything was put on hold because I believed she needed me. Jenna looked at me, anger filling her expression. And she calls you a failure? That's so messed up. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm come over me. I always thought her criticisms were just her way of motivating me. I thought deep down she really appreciated what I was doing. But I was wrong. Jenna looked stunned. So what are you going to do? I took the folder back, feeling my resolve crystallize. I was ready to take the hardest, but also most liberating step of my life. I'm done. I already have the paperwork ready to remove myself from all her accounts. Aren't you going to confront her? Jenna asked. What would be the point? I replied, shaking my head. She'd just deny it or tell me I was being too sensitive. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. I showed Jenna how I had been saving a little money each month, hoping to be able to go back to nursing school. Now, I'm going to use this money for this, I said, as I transferred the funds I had set aside for my mother's treatment into my personal savings account. The action was small, but it felt monumental. Wow, Jenna murmured, clearly impressed. Are you sure? I've never been so sure of anything, I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. I spent 5 years being her safety net while she dismissed everything I did. That ends today. And there, in that moment, I finally understood. This wasn't about others, it wasn't about the criticism, it wasn't about the judgments. It was about me. I had lost my way along the way trying to please others, trying to be what they wanted me to be. But now, I was choosing to be myself. I was ready to follow my path, even if it meant giving up the approval of those I loved. I showed Jenna the acceptance letter to the nursing program that I had almost passed up because of my mother's treatments. I'll start in the fall, I told her with a small but firm smile. And I won't put it off again. Jenna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'll send you the full video, just in case you need it. As we parted, I felt the weight of years of obligation lift off me. For the first time in a long time, I was choosing myself. The guilt I'd expected to feel was gone. In its place was a sense of clarity and purpose that had long since been lost. When I called the insurance company, the representative sounded confused. Do you want to remove yourself as a co-signer on Patricia Sullivan's accounts? May I ask why? Personal reasons, I said, my voice firmer than I'd ever imagined it would be. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was starting a new phase of my life. I was taking control. I had done most of the work of separating my finances. I was dismantling the network I'd created to support my mother. Most importantly, I was rebuilding myself. In my heart, I knew this was the first step on a journey of self-empowerment. And now, my invitation to you is this. If you too are in a moment of change, if you too are ready to choose yourself, share your story in the comments. Let's build this community of strength, courage, and transformation together. The path may be difficult, but you are not alone. Life is yours to live. And now, it's your turn to take the first step. I made this decision for personal reasons, but I knew everyone needed to be informed, as my mother might need assistance moving forward. I enclosed the full breakdown of the financial and medical support I had provided over the years. Every payment, every appointment, every hour spent managing her care was documented, and the evidence was irrefutable. My cousin Jenna sent me the full video of the live stream, as promised. I downloaded it and saved several copies. One on my computer, one in the cloud, and one on a USB drive. I had no immediate plans for the video, but something told me it might be needed. The doorbell rang, catching me by surprise. I looked out the window and saw my mother standing on my porch. Her face was distorted with anger. My heart raced. She yelled through the door. "Asa, I know you're there. Open this door now." I stood silently, watching her. The shadow of her body passed under the door. You missed 3 of my calls. My medication refill was denied at the pharmacy. What are you doing? I took a deep breath and spoke clearly through the door. I'm not going to do this anymore, Mom. You'll be receiving information from the insurance company soon. I suggest you read it carefully. Her anger grew, but I stood firm. Open this door. She screamed, and without hesitation I said as calmly as I could, "No." The only words that seemed important on my lips were, "I heard what you really think of me. I think it's time for us both to move on with our lives." There was a moment of confused silence before she burst out. "This is about money. After everything I've done for you. I almost laughed at the irony of it. Goodbye, Mom. Please don't come back. As she continued to protest, I walked away from the door and back to my laptop, getting back to where I had started. With each step I took, I felt lighter, as if I was finally letting go of a burden I had carried for so long. What had once felt like a huge responsibility was now melting away. Within hours of sending the email to the family, my phone was blowing up with notifications. Aunt Maureen was shocked and horrified by my decision to abandon my mother. Uncle James thought I was being selfish and cruel. My cousin Thomas suggested that I work out any petty disagreements with my mother. Only Jenna and, surprisingly, my elderly Aunt Bridget seemed to understand. Bridget's message was simple. It takes courage to stand up for yourself, my dear. Call me if you need anything. I blocked my mother's number first. Then I silenced one by one the relatives who hadn't bothered to listen to my side of the story. The silence that followed was, to my surprise, peaceful. 3 days later, I was sitting in the admissions office at Boston's nursing school, finalizing my reapplication for the fall semester. The counselor said to me, "You've been out of the program for some time, Ms. Sullivan. But your prior academic record is strong. You'll need to take a placement exam to determine if any refresher courses are needed." I replied with a smile, "I understand." The excitement inside me was indescribable. I had already begun reviewing my old textbooks, and as I walked around campus, I felt a sense of belonging that had been missing for years. This was where I was supposed to be, pursuing my own dreams, instead of living to meet someone else's needs. I knew my real estate business would need to adjust to accommodate my new study schedule, but I had already begun planning. I would focus on fewer clients, focus on higher value properties, and hire a part-time assistant to handle administrative tasks. My income would decrease, but without the expenses for my mother, I could manage. When I returned home, I found a formal envelope waiting for me. It was a letter from the insurance company, addressed to my mother but mistakenly sent to my address. The letter detailed the changes in coverage and the significant increase in premiums now that I was no longer a guarantor. I should have felt guilty, but instead, I felt vindicated. My phone rang. It was Jenna. "Have you seen what's going on in the family chat group?" she asked bluntly. "She's telling everyone that you've had a mental breakdown, that you're under stress from your failed business, and that's why you're acting like this." I could hear the outrage in Jenna's voice. "She's completely twisting everything," she said. I sighed, knowing this was just another one of her attempts to manipulate the situation. Jenna continued, "She didn't realize I'm still in the chat group. And she convinced Aunt Maureen to let her move in temporarily until she gets her medical situation sorted out." I shook my head. She's always been good at finding someone to bail her out. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and stared at the video file Jenna had sent. It was the live stream that had started this whole thing. I hadn't watched the video since the first time, when it shattered everything I thought was true. My finger hovered over the play button, but something kept me from clicking. I knew it held the power to show everyone who my mother really was, but I didn't need it. I had the evidence if I needed it, but right now, I had more important things to focus on. My nursing school application was complete. My placement exam was scheduled. And for the first time in years, I was planning my future, not managing someone else's crisis. The insurance letter sat on my desk, a reminder of the changes I had implemented. After a moment's thought, I addressed a new envelope to my mother's official residence. I placed the insurance letter inside and added a short note. This was sent to my address by mistake. I suggest you read it carefully. No signature. No emotion. Just facts. As I dropped the envelope into the mailbox, I felt another piece of my burden being lifted. The consequences of her actions were now hers to bear, not mine. And so, 2 weeks passed in relative calm. I threw myself headlong into nursing school, studying in every spare moment between real estate showings and client meetings. The placement exam was scheduled for Friday, and with each practice test, my confidence grew. Then came the ambush. I was finishing a showing of a 3-bedroom colonial in Brookline when I saw, in the rearview mirror, my mother and Aunt Maureen waiting by my mother's car, parked in the parking lot. My first impulse was to drive away, but they had clearly seen me, and that would only delay the inevitable. I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked over to them. "Sinead," my mother said, her voice sickeningly sweet, "we need to talk." I could see the tension in her face, Her hair was disheveled, and she was leaning heavily on her cane, a support she usually used only when she wanted to emphasize her condition. "I have nothing to say," I said, my keys tightly gripped in my hand. Aunt Maureen stepped forward. "Your mother is struggling, CD. Her medication costs have tripled and she can no longer make appointments with her specialists." "Is that what you wanted?" I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "What I wanted, Auntie, was to be treated with basic respect and appreciation. What I wanted was recognition for 5 years of sacrifice. What I wanted was a mother who wouldn't call me a hopeless failure behind my back." My mother's face paled. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the video of Jenna's mother's live stream of the family dinner," I said, keeping a steady gaze. "I heard everything you said about me." A flash of recognition crossed her face, quickly replaced by defensive anger. "You're twisting things." "I was just venting some frustration. Everyone does that." Aunt Maureen looked confused. "Video? Patricia, what is she talking about?" I almost laughed at the irony. My mother hadn't even told her closest allies about the live stream, probably hoping I'd never find out. "Show her the video if you want," I said calmly. "Or don't, it doesn't change anything. My decision is made." My mother changed tactics, her voice cracking. "I'm your mother, see. After everything I've done for you, how can you abandon me when I need you most?" Something snapped inside me. 5 years of pent-up resentment bubbled to the surface. "Everything you've done for me?" I echoed in disbelief. "Let me tell you what I did for you. I put my entire life on hold, spent over $100,000 on your care, drove you to every appointment, filled every prescription, fought with insurance companies on your behalf. And in return, you called me pathetic, mocked my career, the career I built specifically to support you." My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "I sent proof to everyone in the family. Every payment, every appointment, every sacrifice. So don't stand there and act like I'm the villain in this story." Aunt Maureen was looking at my mother differently now, doubt creeping into her expression. "Patricia," she said slowly, "what exactly was on this video?" My mother ignored her aunt, focusing all her despair on me. "I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but that's an overreaction. I'm dealing with serious health complications." "I'm aware," I replied calmly. "And I've given you 5 years of continuous support. Now it's someone else's turn." I turned to Aunt Maureen. "She's living with you now, right? Has she asked you for money? How many doctor's appointments have you taken her to? How many prescriptions have you filled?" Aunt Maureen's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said, walking back to my car. "I wish you both the best, but I won't be manipulated anymore." My mother called after me, desperate. "You can't just leave, family." I paused with my hand on the car door, not looking back. "You're right about one thing, Mom. Family doesn't walk away from family. But family doesn't destroy each other or take advantage of each other either. So maybe ask yourself who really left first." As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. My mother was gesturing wildly, clearly scolding Aunt Maureen for something. Some things never change, I thought. But I had changed. And as I headed home to continue my nursing studies, I realized that for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. 3 months passed in a blur of activity. I passed the nursing placement exam with flying colors. I enrolled in the accelerated program for students returning to education, and reorganized my real estate business to accommodate my new schedule. I hired Kylie, a brilliant college student, as a part-time assistant to handle paperwork and coordinate showings while I was in class. The transition wasn't seamless. There were late-night scheduling conflicts and the occasional bout of self-doubt, but each small victory reaffirmed that I had made the right choice. The burden I had been carrying for years was lifted, and I faced each day with renewed energy and a clear sense of purpose. My family situation had reached an uncomfortable impasse after our confrontation in the parking lot. After a long time, my mother seemed to show her true colors to Aunt Maureen, who quietly reached out to me a week later. "I had no idea what you were dealing with," she admitted over coffee. "Patricia told me you were being difficult and selfish. I should have asked your side of the story." "It's okay," I said, surprising myself with how much I actually meant it. My mom has always been good at controlling the narrative. The Boston Real Estate Association's annual award ceremony wasn't something I'd paid much attention to in years past. I'd been too busy caring for my mom to attend industry events. But when my broker nominated me for the Real Estate Resilience Award, recognizing agents who have overcome significant challenges while maintaining their businesses, I was touched. "You're a role model, Sinead," my colleague Jeffrey insisted during our weekly office meeting. "You closed more deals than anyone else in the office while you were starting nursing school. If that's not resilience, I don't know what is." I hadn't expected to win, but I was looking forward to the ceremony. It was a chance to celebrate how far I had come, both professionally and personally. The night of the ceremony arrived, and I found myself in a hotel ballroom, surrounded by the Boston real estate community. I was wearing a dark blue dress I had purchased specifically for the occasion. My first non-professional splurge in years. After grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, I mingled with colleagues and reconnected with industry contacts I hadn't seen in years. "Sinead Sullivan," I heard a familiar voice call out. I turned to see Margot Stevens, one of Boston's most successful real estate agents. "I was hoping to see you here," she said. "I've heard great things about your work in the Brookline market." We chatted about recent real estate trends, and I found myself easily drawn into the conversation. A welcome change from the distracted, overwhelmed person I had been for years. My phone vibrated in my purse. Ignoring it at first, I continued to enjoy the moment. When it vibrated again a minute later, I excused myself and glanced at the screen. There were 5 missed calls from an unknown number and a text message. "This is Jenna, using Uncle Patrick's phone. Emergency call. Call back ASAP." A knot formed in my stomach. I stepped into a quiet hallway and returned the call. "Jenna, what's going on?" I asked, anxiety rising. "Sorry to bother you," Jenna said, her voice tight. "I'm at the hospital with your mom. She fell, and they think it might be a reaction to the new medication she's taking." I closed my eyes, waiting for the familiar wave of guilt and obligation to wash over me. It came, but it was different this time. Manageable, not overwhelming. "Is she stable?" I asked. "Yes, but they're keeping her overnight for observation," Jenna replied. I didn't want to call, but Uncle Patrick insisted. I heard muffled voices, and then the phone changed hands. "Sinead, Patrick here," his voice said. "Look, I know things have been tough, but your mother needs you. The doctors have questions about her medical history that we can't answer." As we spoke, I watched the ceremony attendees make their way to the main hall. The award ceremony would begin soon. "I understand," I said, making my decision. "But I'm at an important work event right now. I can go to the hospital later." "This is your mother we're talking about," Patrick's voice hardened. "Surely whatever party you're at can wait." The old Sinead would have agreed immediately, abandoning her own needs for my mother. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I'll be there in about 2 hours," I said firmly. "Please tell the doctors I'll answer any questions then. And Patrick, thank you for being there for her." I ended the call and took a deep breath. As I turned to rejoin the ceremony, I caught sight of my reflection in a decorative mirror. Shoulders back, head held high, eyes clear. For the first time in years I recognized myself. And the winner of the Real Estate Resilience Award is Sinead Sullivan. The room erupted in applause. For a moment, I stood frozen in shock. I hadn't really expected to win. Jeffrey nudged me with his elbow, smiling broadly as I stood up and walked onto the stage. The crystal trophy felt substantial in my hands. As I stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the audience, I saw colleagues, mentors, and competitors all united in recognition of my work. The validation was overwhelming. "Thank you," I began, my voice firmer than I felt. "This means more to me than I can express. The last few years have been challenging. Balancing a demanding career with personal obligations. There were many days when I wasn't sure I could keep going." I paused, remembering the countless nights I spent researching treatment options for my mother, the mornings spent rushing to prepare for showings, the sleepless nights of worry. But I knew that real estate isn't just about selling houses. It's about resilience, adapting to changing markets, overcoming obstacles, and finding solutions when it seems impossible. Those same skills helped me navigate my personal challenges and eventually find my way back to my original passion: nursing. The crowd murmured with interest at this revelation. I'm now pursuing my nursing degree while continuing to serve my real estate clients, and I couldn't be happier. So this award isn't just about professional resilience. It's a reminder that we can reinvent ourselves at any point in our lives. Thank you for this honor. The applause followed me back to my seat, where Jeffrey and our other colleagues congratulated me with enthusiastic handshakes and hugs as the ceremony concluded. Several people approached me to ask about my nursing studies, genuinely interested in my unconventional career path. When I checked my phone again, it was almost 9 o'clock. I had 3 more missed calls from Uncle Patrick and a text from Jenna. She's stable, take it easy. I gathered my things, said goodbye, and headed to my car, the trophy carefully wrapped in my bag. The hospital was a 20-minute drive across town, and I used the time to mentally prepare myself for the inevitable confrontation. When I arrived at the hospital room, I found my mother sitting on the bed, looking remarkably alert for someone who had supposedly experienced a serious medical emergency. Uncle Patrick sat in a visitor's chair next to her, while Jenna stood awkwardly by the window. Finally, my mother said as I entered, her tone acidic, "Nice of you to fit us into your busy schedule." I set my bag in the corner, the trophy case visible. "Hello, Mom. I came by as soon as my event was over. How are you feeling?" "How do you think I'm feeling?" "I passed out, I could have died, and you were too busy partying to care." Uncle Patrick cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. The doctor said it was probably a reaction to the new medication. They adjusted the dosage and she should be fine to go home tomorrow. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. That's good news. I'm glad it wasn't more serious. My mother's face contorted in frustration at my calm demeanor. This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't abandoned me. My new insurance is useless. I can't afford half of my medications, and these new doctors don't understand my condition like my specialists did. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. It must be hard adjusting to new healthcare providers. My measured response seemed to infuriate her even more. Is that all you have to say after what you put me through? I looked at Jenna, whose expression reflected a mix of embarrassment and sympathy. She gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. Mom, I said quietly, I've supported you for 5 years. I put my life on hold to make sure you got the best care possible. I did everything I could for you, and in return you called me a hopeless failure. You mocked the career that paid for your treatments. You laughed at my dreams. Uncle Patrick frowned. What are you talking about? Jenna stepped forward. The video, Uncle Patrick. The live stream I accidentally recorded at dinner a few months ago. Didn't Mom tell you about it? My mother's face paled. This is completely irrelevant. You're twisting things out of context to justify your selfish behavior. I reached into my purse, took out the trophy, and placed it on the nightstand. The crystal caught the light, the engraving clearly visible. Real Estate Resilience, Sinead Sullivan. I won an award tonight, I explained to Uncle Patrick, for maintaining a successful business despite significant challenges. Those challenges included supporting my mother financially and medically for 5 years while she belittled my accomplishments behind my back. Understanding dawned on Uncle Patrick's face as he looked from the trophy to my mother's defensive expression. I didn't come here to argue, I continued. I came because you needed medical information and I wanted to make sure you were okay. I don't wish you any harm, Mom. I never have. I simply couldn't continue to sacrifice my life for someone who didn't appreciate that. The room fell silent. For once, my mother had no sharp retort, no manipulative tactics at the ready. She simply stared at the trophy, visible proof of the success she had so callously rejected. I should go, she said softly. I have an early class tomorrow. Jenna, can I give you a ride home? As we left the room, I heard Uncle Patrick speaking to my mother in hushed tones, as if trying to understand. The conversation I had been avoiding for months was finally happening. But this time I wouldn't be the only one struggling to be heard. 3 months later, I stood in my crisp white scrubs, hands steady as I administered N4 to my patient. My nursing instructor nodded approvingly as she watched my technique. Excellent work, Sullivan. Your clinical skills are improving rapidly. I smiled as I secured the line. Thank you. It seemed like everything was finally falling into place. After finishing my shift at the university hospital, I headed to my car. I stopped to check my phone. A text message from Jenna lit up my screen. Interview with Professor going viral. 20,000 views. I laughed, shaking my head in amazement. Last week, I was interviewed by the Boston Medical Journal about career changers who enter nursing later in life. The interviewer was particularly interested in how my real estate experience prepared me for healthcare. Both fields require attention to detail, strong communication skills, and the ability to help people through major life transitions. I had explained that both had taught me the importance of boundaries, something every healthcare professional needs. As I drove home, my phone rang on the car's Bluetooth. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Sinead? It's Patrick." My uncle's voice sounded hesitant. "Do you have a minute?" I tensed a little. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's okay. I just saw your interview. It was really inspiring." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the compliment. "Your mother saw it too," he added quietly. I waited, bracing myself for news of his latest criticisms or complaints. "She didn't say much," Patrick continued, "but I think seeing you in that nursing uniform finally made things real for her. You're really doing this, becoming a nurse, like you always wanted to." I pulled into my driveway, letting the car idle as I processed his words. "I'm proud of you," he said, filling the silence. "And I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Patrick. That means a lot." After we hung up, I sat for a moment, reflecting on how much had changed in less than a year. The real estate award trophy sat on my mantelpiece, now next to my nursing textbooks. Physical reminders of my past accomplishments and future goals. My mother and I still weren't speaking, but that was okay. I had stopped expecting validation from someone who couldn't give it. Instead, I found validation in my own accomplishments, in the patients who thanked me for my care, in the professional recognition that validated my choices. As I walked into my home, my sanctuary, I smiled at the stack of nursing journals on my coffee table. Tonight I would study for next week's exam. Maybe I would call Jenna later to catch up. Tomorrow, I had 2 property showings scheduled between classes. My life was entirely purposeful and entirely my own. Patrick's phone call was a grace note, long awaited, not necessary for my happiness, but welcome. However, if my mother had come to accept my decision, it no longer defined me. I had reclaimed my path, my future, and most importantly, my sense of self-worth. And I realized that when I settled into my studies, it was the greatest victory of all.